Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Allen Simon, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon. And I've just watched the movie with you, so I feel a little drained. You'll have to give me a minute or two to get my mojo back. What a beautiful movie. Please join me in welcoming the star and the director, Tomas Mann, and Alfonso Gomez-Rejon.
Thank you.
Thomas, let's begin with you. Were your parents big fans of German literature, or is that just an accident, or did they have no idea of German literature?
When I was born, I don't think they had just finished reading Death in Venice or something. I think it was just they liked the name and
Death in Tennis, you mean?
Right. Yes, of course. Sorry. No, I don't. I think it's just a coincidence, but it worked out nicely for this film.
Well, it's seeing the movie for the second time and feeling just as emotionally affected by it as I did before. It all really hinges, I think, on how we feel about you and what the arc of your character is in this, because we're on this journey with you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about how this project came to you, and a little bit about what appealed to you about it, and maybe some of the ways in which this character, is very much like you, and maybe not so much.
Right. Well, I mean, the script came to me like any other project, just through my agent, and I read it, and when you're someone like that, or looks my age, I've been playing 17 for like 6 years. So I had done so many like high school set like themed movies and coming of age movies that when I read this one, it really stood out, and it didn't feel like another teen movie. It felt like just a very honest story about people who happened to be very young, kind of going through something that was beyond their control and something that they were trying to understand. And I liked that Greg was this sort of I don't know, he's just like sort of irritating in a lot of ways, and you want to like shake him sometimes, and I like that the script sort of embraced the selfishness of teenagers, and I saw a lot of myself in him in the way that, I don't know, there's a lot of movies where, the main character is not, a less than admirable person, and when you see those qualities in yourself, I think that's where, that's when you can really relate to something, when you see, I don't know, when you see someone making a selfish choice and you think, oh, I don't agree with that, but would I have done something differently? I don't know if I was in that position. So it was about putting myself in the character's shoes and not judging him, and just kind of really wanting to take this emotional journey, which was something new for me as an actor, and I didn't know that I could do it. And there are a lot of scenes that I really stressed about that I didn't know that I was going to be able to, like, oh, am I going to be able to, like, cry on that day? It's like a weird thing that, like, you shouldn't be thinking about that, but every actor's like, I want to have that perfect moment where the tear just comes down and close up and pauses in the middle of my cheek. But it just doesn't work like that. And so it's just about kind of believing in the characters and really caring about the project. And with someone like Olivia, it was just incredibly easy to play off of her. And from the moment we met, that I knew it was going to be something special, because she's so talented, and we had such an easy rapport. And yeah, I don't know. It was the whole experience. Now it was long ago now, but it was a whole just amazing blur of time in my life. But I had the best time making it. It's a very, very personal movie for me.
How challenging was the scene where you and she, the breakup scene, where one of the few places where the camera isn't moving, where it's just on the two of you? Seems like 10 minutes, but it's probably 4 or 5, I'm guessing. 6 or 7. Yeah.
It's like 5.5.
5.5. But who's counting?
Some people are.
And it's just an extraordinary moment in the movie. I mean, it's really a testament to your faith in your actors and a faith in the material that you allowed it to play out like that. Tell us a little bit about it, first from your viewpoint as an actor, about how how that scene worked that day.
Yeah, well, we didn't know it was going to be shot like that. I think originally we were going to do it the day before, but I think it was right after we had shot some other really emotional scene with Olivia, and I think we were just feeling kind of drained, and to go into that scene, we really just wanted to attack it head on and wanted it to feel fresh, and so we waited till the next day to do it, and but we could kind of block the scene out, and we got there and we didn't even want to rehearse it at all. We just wanted to kind of knock it out in as few takes as possible, and then after that, he was just like, all right, we're moving on. So I didn't know it was just going to be that one setup. But I think if we had known, we might have like saved it or something, or tried to, I don't know, do something special when it was our coverage. But it was great. It was, like you said, it was just to have Alfonso trust us enough to just let the camera linger on us and let the scene play out was really cool and like a rare thing.
And it's so effective because as watching it the second time, it's so apparent that the camera is so active in this movie, and in this instance, it really just stops. And was that always your plan, or did it kind of come to you more in the during production? And I'm also wondering, were you able to shoot this pretty much chronologically? You weren't. Wow, that's even more astonishing to me.
No, there's at one point, once Olivia shaved her head, that forced us to do a sequence in chronology. I think the death sequence in the hospital was the last shot of the last day of production. So there was a few things that I think were that were able to shoot that, but because the adult actors came and went. We had Molly for 4 days, and Nick for 4 days, and John for 4 days. And all the high school sequences had to be condensed to, I think, 3 or 4 days. You just don't have that luxury on a film this size. But it did hopefully, I think, really help, I think, Thomas and Olivia to be able to shoot at least those big emotional scenes from her head shaved on in some sort of chronology.
Now, did you have a rehearsal period before the movie started with your primary actors?
Not really, and I adore actors, and I love rehearsals, and with this film, or the audition process was so long because the movie fell apart once and then came back, and Olivia and Thomas were still auditioning, and at one point Olivia was cast, and Thomas kept coming back because I had to. Thomas was me, and I was going to be Greg, and I was going to take this journey with him. And there's so many, tonal shifts in the. So at the first audition, it's quite short. You may do 1 or 2 scenes, and then and I love Thomas, and every time he came back, we did a couple more scenes, and at the very end, we did a chemistry read when we were doing, I think, 30 pages worth of sides. And at that point, you could, it was clear.
By chemistry, you mean with Olivia?
Yeah, that was the key to the audition process, really, to make sure that the chemistry wasn't on camera sexual, romantic in any kind of way, because I would never deliver on that. It wasn't that kind of a movie.
Except for that one moment, we see that it could be there.
Well, maybe in 5 years, maybe. But not now. And it was never going to be a movie where there was you're going to lead up to a kiss or anything like that. So that was but I think we auditioned so much and tested the material so much. If something didn't feel right, I'd go back to Jesse, and so by the time we had a very short pre-production, I think all we wanted to do was talk about character. So
what were those conversations like?
It was a lot of conversations with sharing. They were different with different
and were
people.
They with them in groups or singly?
I think it was. I prefer one-on-ones. It's better to agree on the spine of the character one-on-one and discuss it, so that if you do improvise, you're all coming from the same place. Even though there was very little improvisation, it was about finding the truth to the character and the truth to every scene, and maybe do a page turn at my place or over dinner. The same thing with Olivia, and then RJ, who was the very last, late addition to the movie. Then once RJ came in, it's about seeing all 3 of them together, and then that's because he was so late in the process. We did do rehearsals with Thomas and RJ together, but Olivia and Thomas and I, we would just talk about character, and the big scenes. They auditioned with those scenes over and over again, that we just saved them, and like the long take we didn't. I sketched out whatever image was going to be and where she was going to be and where he was going to be. And that was supposed to be a master that was going to be followed by 2 close-ups, but it just felt so right that you wanted to preserve that moment and not try to chase that high again. It was so uncomfortable being there and so emotional. I could barely say cut. In fact, I think I told my AD, who was behind me, to say cut. He was crying, so we couldn't, we just kind of, and okay, that's it. And then when you move on after something like that, it's terrifying, but it's exhilarating too. It's it's directing. You're like, okay, this is the shot, and this is what they were going to look like. The audience will look at this and be uncomfortable with Greg because the spirit of the movie and the design of the movie and the moves of the cameras or the stillness is all meant to be driven by like Greg's interior life. So if you're uncomfortable, he is also.
Well, it's really a kind of a dazzling feature debut. I know you had done television work.
I did one horror film before
did?
this. Yeah,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is with me. That's a very stylized little horror film that
What's
has
it
its
called?
fans. It's called The Town That Dreaded Sundown. It was a reimagining of a 1976 Charles B. Pierce movie.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
The
and
original.
The original. So this movie, it's also it's a weird. It's in some way connected. Some critic pointed it out, connected to this movie, in that they both celebrate movies, and that's about a town frozen in time because of a movie that they play over and over again. And then it was a really fun premise and visually interesting. Not a great experience, but
Well, at
great
least
performances, by the way. I love the performances.
at least it's still
Veronica
out there.
Cartwright.
Unlike Kubrick's first movie, Fear and Desire. Have you ever seen that?
Never
by the
seen
way,
it.
it gives every
he
first
stole-
filmmaker a hope
Well, he
because it's so bad.
he bought all the rights. He bought all the prints and destroyed them.
He did, except one,
Uh-huh.
and it aired finally on Turner Classic
did it
Movies
really?
after his death. Yeah, and you can. I'll send you a DVD of it if you want to see
But
it.
the greatest thing about Town That Dreaded Sundown was every weekend I'd have dinner with Ed Herman and talk about Reds and Warren Beatty. It was his last movie, and Ed Lauder, Veronica Cartwright, just a great cast. We had a great time making
Well,
it.
this is such a great cast, and
Talk about Town, though.
let's talk. Yeah, let's keep talking about Town That Dreaded Sundown. The original we'll talk about. This is a really, this is a movie for movie lovers, and I'm wondering if Jesse Andrews' book had. It was a young adult novel. Tell us a little bit about how you became involved with the project, and if I'm assuming the film stuff, most of it, if not all of it, was invented in the not from the novel, in the script process.
In the novel, they make films. The references are different. I love the idea that they were making films, but I wanted to use this as an opportunity to make films that meant a lot to me.
Was Sockwork Orange in it?
Sockwork Orange is in there, and I think Agira, Wrath of God, and then it more like Star Trek and Star Wars, and to me it felt if Nick Offerman is going to introduce Greg and Earl to Agira, then you want to keep going down that path, and that gave me the opportunity to celebrate a bunch of films that shaped me.
Yes, it's really nice how many of these films, like Mean Streets. I know
that's it, yeah.
you got after film school, you went to NYU and you went to AFI. You worked as an assistant to a number of people, including Martin Scorsese.
That was during film school. That was during
That was
NYU.
during film
Yeah.
school.
I went to New York because of him, and then 3 years later was lucky enough to
First
get
of
into
all, I
his
guess I
office.
have to ask: has he seen your movie?
Yeah, many times. And we did on the DVD. There's an interview. We sat down and interviewed each other, and which was the highlight of this entire journey, I think. For his first question is, "Who did you have to bribe to get into my office?" Because of course he didn't know the story of how I got into his office. So, that was in film school, and that's why. And then Mean Street was the movie that really changed my DNA when I discovered it in VHS, and that's why it's on the wall.
And
Greg's
I
wall.
think you've said you went to NYU because of that
him, yeah.
movie. You grew up in Texas,
On the border, yeah.
and were you a film buff growing up? Were your parents film fans?
A lot of music and art and love of the arts, and my mom, I think, has a radio in every room, and she kind of like twirls from room to room dancing. There was always music and poetry. There's always a lot of love of the arts, and my parents were raised on the golden age of Mexican cinema, that by the 70s and 80s was at its worst. It no longer existed. So, and then it was. HBO was maybe starting, but we were talking about a small border town with 3 channels, and that was it. So they love some of the some great Mexican classics. So I would discover films through some of my best friend's older brothers who were my brother was.
Well, what were some of the?
Well, Los Olvidados was something you would talk about that'd be common. But it was in the early '80s when the VHS revolution started and they opened a place called the Video Hut, walking distance from my house. That you started to. My friend, I know like two key moments with my friend. Well, one really, my friend Russell Jordan's brother loaned me Apocalypse Now on VHS. So I'm 11 or 12, I think, and you imagine you watching it like this in a tube TV, and that did something. And then the making of documentaries weren't really around. There's a Leonard Nimoy show, hosted show called Lights, Camera, Action, I think, on WTBS that had 3 episodes that ran in a loop. And there's those things. I mean, Burden of Dreams existed, but not in Laredo. And so the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller, you got to see John Landis direct, and that was a mystery up until that point, you know. But then once I started getting addicted to discovering filmmakers through VHS and starting to kind of learn their voice and how they communicate and how you can tell within a second if it was a David Lynch movie or Coppola or whoever, Tim Burton, whoever I was watching at the time. But everything led to Scorsese, you know. But I didn't start chronologically. I think I went backwards to Mean Streets, and I remember the jacket was very specific and, you know, black and white with a gun, and that was very personal. That really was about me and my brother to some extent, and the Catholic iconography documented in a way that I'd never seen before, and I was, you know, raised the Catholic. There was all these new things that felt like I get him or he gets me, and then that led to him, and luckily he writes a lot. You know, well, Faber and Faber came out with Scorsese on Scorsese '89, I think, and that became my Bible. And then that led to NYU, that led to watching as many films as I could every day.
And I recall you're saying at the Jeff Goldsmith's Q&A that when you were the PA on Casino, you walked around with your own little storyboards in your pocket, hoping
Yes.
Marty would notice them.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you, which is something I would think your character would do if he were.
I would draw on the sides every day. How would I approach this scene? And then I'd have my drawings, and the drawings would be facing out. And you're with him every day, like this.
Hey, Marty.
And like, weren't you gonna ask me like how I envision the scene? Never. But it was a great exercise to see his approach and how he would realize
And
it,
it allowed
which
you
was
to
better
keep
by
your,
the way.
which I think is really smart because it allowed you to have your own little voice and see how what your thinking would be, and then see what a master would do, and incorporate it into your own education.
And then seeing it through editorial. That was to see the movie from that movie, from script or scenario, and see how that evolved into many versions of the screenplay that I was like the keeper of, and then to see it until I went with him to a test screening, and to see it evolve is that's, you know, a real education in some ways.
So how did you come to this project?
The same way as tell me your name again. Thomas. The same way as Thomas. It was. I don't know why I got it. I wasn't looking to make a high school film.
Was Indian Paintbrush the production company? They were already involved?
And I was intrigued by the title, and I think it just made the blacklist, and so they sent it to me to read, and I was very moved by it. I thought it was very funny. You see a lot of yourself in who Greg was in high school, and then the turning point with the Mr. McCarthy scene, and then I really started to see it as a way as an emotional outlet for myself.
And what were the aspects of it that you know, someone said, now I'm forgetting who, you know, that you can't make a movie that isn't you as a director. Where do you think you are in this movie? Did you have a keen sense of that from the first read, or did you discover it more as it went on?
No, from the first read, and it kept on revealing itself over and over, even until we showed it, released it for the first time. Yeah, I mean, it's dedicated to my father, and who I was very close to, and so that I never grieved. I don't think you finished grieving, but I never even attempted to. I just worked. and then I was at a point where I couldn't do that anymore. I had to deal with it, and I didn't know how. I didn't have the right words to express. I couldn't look at photographs. I couldn't read anything. And then I think that's when someone truly dies. And when I saw the film and this idea that you could, the story can continue to unfold, I really wanted to believe it. And so making the film was very cathartic. And that personal connection to the film is now very public. We talk about it all the time. I certainly do, because it's dedicated to my father. But no one really knew about it. But I did share a lot with Thomas, because this is what I'm feeling. This is what what maybe we can go through this journey together. So there was a huge connection and a huge purpose for making the film, that maybe I can believe this idea at the end. And I did. And now, since releasing the film at Sundance, it screened with the dedication there for the first time. That's when I started getting questions about him, and I wasn't ready for that. But now that it opens you up, and like Thomas in the film, he starts to listen, and then you're open to hearing stories, and you keep learning about him, and then you discover new things about him. So it's a part of the journey I wasn't expecting.
Well, it won both the Audience Award and Grand Jury Prize at Sundance, and it's been one of these movies, very few, where both critics and audiences have really very fully embraced it. And I think one of the things that appealed to me so much about it is that on some level it's about the cathartic power of art. Yeah. And we see this movie at the end, which I guess must have been I guess all the little movies must have been very challenging, but the end one, I'm thinking, may have been almost as hard for you to come up with as it was for Thomas's character.
Yes, we should both talk about that. That was the Ed Burson and Nate Marsh animated that incredible film, but that was the beginning of. I knew that that film in the script was a montage of all the bad films, but I think it was time that he had to start to find his voice and start to express himself alone now without Earl, and face this abstraction and as an homage as well, but to experimental films. And there's a lot of references leading up to that with Brakhage and Warhol and all that, Eames. And but when I sat down with Ed and Nate, so how we can do that? What is this? So we started looking at. So they forced me to articulate into words what is it that we're trying to achieve in this little film, which is going from the nonverbal, the verbal to the nonverbal, the literal to the. It's basically the little film. The story of that film is her becoming energy. And she was always, the color that we assigned to Rachel was yellow, which is in every frame. Most of the frames in the green, in his jacket, in his bedroom, and the color of Earl's house. She is everywhere in the film already. And at the end, she was going to when she, whatever your interpretation of that is, depending where you are spiritually in your life, she was going to become energy, and that was going to be holding on the color for a while. But it was this, what is it, 3 parts, and it eventually ended up being a homage to Warhol's screen test. Warhol went to that high school, Warhol Museum is there. They would have been exposed to these parodies. And then it was the Charles and Ray Eames, which is the beginning of them making a film for somebody else as opposed to for themselves, which is an animated film, stop motion, not unlike, it's 2 references there.
Is it the Power of 10 movie?
No, it's the Charles and Ray Eames Kaleidoscope Jazz Chairs a little bit, and the Solomon Lane Bass opening credits to Age of Innocence with the blooming flowers, but it's pillows. So now they're looking to her and their stories and their jokes, and then eventually becomes something you can't express into words anymore, which is his fear, his love, his confusion, and his how gratefully is to have had her. But he's dealing with those emotions head on in the only way that he can.
Thomas, did you participate in some of the making of these movies within the movie as the movie maker?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, obviously there's ones that we're both in, so someone else was operating the camera, but they all had to believably be made by 2 17-year-olds. So it was kind of, we shot a lot of them in just a couple days, just went around in a van with different costumes in there, just kind of changing as we go, and then getting out at a park, and like, it was just kids running around, and then I'm doing the Klaus Kinski rant, and so it was like, it was really fast, and we just kind of did it as we went in the way that, kids would. We didn't put too much thought into it. We just wanted it to be fun and kind of loose. Yeah. So I don't know. I loved that it was kind of his outlet and his way. It's almost like he needed to make films regardless of whether or not anyone was going to see them. And that was his creative outlet. And he didn't really know how to share that with other people or how to present himself as an artist because it's embarrassing and he doesn't know how to connect with people. So I thought it was really beautiful that his last film is just this kind of weird amalgamation of, it is different influences, but it's still the first original piece that he's really made for someone else. So it's, I think that effort is the most moving part, the fact that he's finally realizing it's not about him and he can't put it into words. He doesn't know how to talk about his feelings. So this, I think, is the closest that he could get.
And all of the other films are in some way obviously ironic in their commentary and intellectual and witty and funny. And the final film is just pure image and pure sound. Can you talk a little bit about your choice of music and working with a composer? I'm a big Brian Eno fan, so I loved that coming in. Tell us a little bit about
it. Was
music.
I guess it started with wanting to score the movie with only music from other movies, using them as score, not as puns. I sometimes like the Vertigo score there for a reason, but other scores like the 400 Blows aren't maybe as popular, and they really serve as score. And the whole movie was going to be that. And then it just evolved with Brian Eno. It went backwards. It started with the big ship in the final scene, and that worked so well because Thomas and Olivia were acting to that. It was at one point there was an early conversation of making that green screen, but it was another character in the room. I know it would have been disastrous, and it was very moving, overwhelming for the entire crew. So we did that for hours, and it never lost its magic.
You played it on set,
constantly
in other words.
loud, and it never got old. It never felt manipulative. It just felt right, and so that led to using a lot of Eno as temp. And then Nico Muhly, who's an incredible composer in New York, did the opening sequence, which is very playful and structured and very much him in control of the narrative. But when he walks to Rachel's house, that's when we decided in post that was the first Eno cue, and you realize every time you're in her bedroom, she's listening to Eno. So she's discovering Eno the way someone now would discover, I don't know, the Smiths, or we discovered, I don't know, Van Halen or whatever, all that would have been current in my time. But the way you discover like Zeppelin when you're, and but it was like, so she's into Eno, and that became her sound, and she kind of takes over the film. But I love the score because I didn't want to use pop songs. You never know when the movie's going to be released and not released seriously, and then it becomes, you use a song, and then by the time the movie's out, it's old. And so that's something about the timeless quality of Eno and the fact that it was very handmade, the texture of the tracks that we use. And then eventually, we couldn't afford anything, but I didn't want to take no unless he told me no. So we got the film to him, he loved the film, and then he started writing music for us. So now that's another layer. So he wrote original music for us as well.
And tell us about the journey to get the movie financed. It ended up, did Indian Paintbrush, which is owned by a wealthy individual who's been committing his own funds to some of Wes Anderson's movies, and this kind of fits within that general kind of mindset, I guess. Did it come to him sort of through that in any way, or?
It was, by the time I became involved, it was already fully financed by him. And so
Steve Rails is his
Stephen
name.
Rails, yeah, who's been amazing and a champion of the film, and he. So it was. So they, using the resources from Indian Paintbrush, they bought the rights to the book and developed the screenplay with Jesse, and brought in Dan Fogelman to produce it, and then eventually other producers came, like Jeremy Dawson, who had already worked on a few films with Rails, and so it was tricky to get up on its feet, and it almost fell apart again when we couldn't find Earl, but then RJ came right at the right time, and it worked.
And let's go back to your casting of the movie. The all of the small parts, all of the adults are really just they're not, you can laugh at them, but they're also very empathetic. We laugh with them more than at them. Particularly the beautiful scene with your parents at the beginning when they tell you about Rachel and the hug. It's both. It's one of those moments that you just, I think, because your character does, your character responds to the sweetness of what they're doing, even at the same time that it's kind of funny and a little off-putting, a little eccentric. Talk to us a little bit about how you worked with your actors on this, because you really got a kind of consistency to tone and performance.
Well, Connie I knew from American Horror Story, and she read the script and called and wanted to be a part of it. And Thomas was already cast, and it felt there was a natural mom for Thomas, you know. And and then everything followed quickly after that. Connie made.
I remember thinking that Nick Offerman should play the dad. I'm like, I don't know who you're thinking of, but you should think of Nick Offerman. And I think Olivia said the same thing the first time we sat down for dinner, and then
it did work out. Yeah, it just and so Connie made the movie real. Actually, I think the combination of Connie and then finding RJ at the last minute, because if we pushed any longer, we'd lose the actors to their TV schedules. But so Connie and John Bernthal was a huge fan of it. I thought it would be perfect for Mr. McCarthy and Nick Offerman, of course, and Molly Shannon, who I've been obsessed with for a very long time. And I love comedians because I think it's very hard, I think, sometimes for dramatic actors to do comedy, but comedians have something that they could somehow do that as well. There's a lot of pain sometimes underneath there. And so it was always about, you know, calibrating the tone, at least what your gut told you, and then you continue doing that in editorial. But it was, I think a lot of it is in, for instance, Molly's close-up when she meets Greg, when we meet her for the first time. So much is going on in those eyes. Within 5 seconds, she's, is a mess. And then there's something about, I remember Molly was saying, but he smells so good, and it's like, but then it becomes some like Mr. Robinson thing, and then it becomes about the cancer
think that for
again.
a second.
Yeah, there's all these things that go on, as you would if you're a woman that we decided on who maybe had a little alcohol issue and maybe relied on her sense of humor to, most of the time, and it wasn't really working anymore. And there's a disconnect between her world down here with a very cold and stark and kind of white Pottery Barn thing, and the nest two floors above her in her world, and full of family photos, and you see that there's some disconnect between mother and daughter. A lot going on in that little moment. But I love actors, and I love that you try to cast people that could find that balance between both. Because if it got too heavy, you can always push back a little bit.
How did you win? I assume in talking to the actors, you discussed tone and sort of level calibration of performance. What kind of guidance did you give them? Did you talk about other movies? Did you play music for them? How did you kind of get them on your wavelength?
But Thomas, Olivia, and RJ are one thing, and then the adults would, we couldn't really rehearse. They would come in a day before, 2 days.
That's
before.
what I meant, was with the adults.
Phone calls, dinners, and it's conversations about the spine of this character. Let's agree on this is who this person is and the tone of the film. Page turn, all that we all to talk about character, really. And certainly, I think Molly showed up like the night before, and her first beat was with you. But you open it up, you hopefully create an environment where it's safe, and that goes for Thomas, Olivia, and RJ. It's safe for me and for them, to take chances, experiment, fail, and that's I think. The biggest thing that I like to do is, if there isn't a very long or no rehearsal process, just agree on what is the spine. It comes down to that, and then create an environment where it feels safe and creative.
Now, in a movie that's so kind of meticulously laid out in terms of how you shot it, was there much freedom for the actors to move around? How did you allow them that kind of expression within the confines of doing something so stylized?
Well, I think you should start talking. I'm talking.
No, it kind of depends on the scene, because there'd be some days where we'd think of some really elaborate shot, and then that would just become a sort of new challenge, like the one shot that takes you, on my first phone call with Rachel, through the house and then up the stairs, and by the end I'm crawling, and that took a long time to get right. And of course it's like choreographing a dance or something, so it can be harder in a way, but it's still, I think it's worth it to get something like that, but I never felt hindered by whatever his plan was for the shot. I mean,
Sometimes, like the beginning of the movie is a little more stylized, and it starts to lose control as he starts to lose control of the movie, really. And so it became looser, certainly in the bedroom scenes. I knew that I didn't want all the bedroom scenes to look the same, like they're always in the same position. But I'd always come up with some kind of proposal there, and then we'd feel it out and see if it felt right. So it's intuitive. You just like, this is a scene where it like the stopping treatment or something else. So one of these other scenes, like it would be counterproductive to say, okay, you have to go here. It's not that kind of a scene, and you keep it looser. And other scenes are much more specific.
Did you shoot the bedroom where so much of it takes place on a stage?
We built the bedroom in the gym of the school.
And when they're first in it for the first time, and we get those, the distance, it's a beautiful shot, pair of shots of over the shoulder of the two kids encountering each other at, what looks like 100 miles away.
Yeah, 10 millimeters.
Was that through lens, or did you build it differently?
No, 10 millimeter lens.
10 millimeter
because
lens.
It's again to have. We wanted to have in Chung shot to have very playful compositions, because if you go into a master in two soft close-ups, it's a romance. All of it. It's going to be a romantic thing, comedy or whatever. But it was just very playful. But there's a lot of information in those shots, and the wide over her to him in the foreground is a carved book that she's working on, and behind him is the wallpaper with one or two squirrels are already there. You just have to look closely. So there's a lot of information in those shots, in the pillows, of course, and just to also keep it playful and not too traditional and conventional, because you wanted to you wanted the audience to understand what movie they were in, and then be able to stay on these shots longer. There's a few very long shots, the polar bear scene, and at that point the audience is with you, and they know what kind of movie they're in.
And you did use a Korean cinematographer who worked on Stoker, right?
Yes.
And an Old Boy. How did that come about, and what was that collaboration like?
It was a dream collaboration. He's the funniest guy on the set. We Skyped with his translator, and he was he would speak in Korean, and then his translator just would crack up and be embarrassed and have to translate it, and it just kept going. I thought it was very funny. But he was the first. I knew that it was going to be the camera was going to be a character, at least in the beginning of the movie. I wasn't going for naturalism. It just kind of evolves into something like that. And I knew that he had a very strong point of view based on his work. And but all he talked about was character and Thomas, and how he saw himself in Thomas, and how much he loved John Hughes movies, and how he wanted to make a movie like this to show that side of himself, because everyone associated him with thrillers and kind of more Baroque style.
And did you have to use a translator on set?
We did, but what do you think? We kind of tortured him most of the time. His English got worse when he was around, so he would be in the panda costume or something.
He just became like another PA on the set. Well, because Chung somehow doesn't really need the translator. He's somehow so sarcastic and can only speak like a few words of English, but he's hilarious.
He's very intuitive, and he's very wonderful on the set, and with actors, there's a wonderful energy when he's around.
Well, we have time for a few questions that have come up to me from the audience, and I'll have to take my glasses off to read them. And from Minerva Garcia, I'm an actress that helped you with your thesis film at NYU. We shot it in our hometown of Laredo, Texas, 20-some years ago.
Roadkill, yes.
I've followed your career since from American Horror Story onwards. What do you think is your signature film style that says it's a Gomez-Rejon film to audiences? And you didn't ask for a job. I'm very proud of you, but
that's amazing.
I'll ask for you. And
no, I don't know about the style question. I think that evolves over time, and I don't know. But more than anything, that was an amazing time of my life, of our life. It was Laredo right before it exploded in size. It was still quite small. We took over an entire highway. We were shooting on the... Yeah. We shoot it on the border, on the bridge, on the actual bridge. We knew so many people. We'd just go on a 60-millimeter Bolex, go back to Mexico and U.S., go through the cars, and everyone would just like, yeah, come on, you knew everybody. Now you'd be shot on site. But that was an incredible time. We'll talk after.
And from Paul Davila, Alfonso, another one. I'm from your hometown of Laredo, Texas. How many people are from
Possible.
Laredo?
It's impossible.
Moved to LA to pursue my dream of being a filmmaker. Congratulations on your achievements. Do you have any advice you could give to a small-town filmmaker, and what do you plan on working on next? IMDb Pro tells us it's a film called A Foreigner with...
Yeah, there might be something that I want to make on the border, actually. But it may not happen this year, may not happen next year. I'm not sure. You always have a few things because things fall apart when you least expect them to, or sometimes it's the nature. It's so hard to put a movie together.
So advice to a small-town filmmaker?
I don't know, a small town, you're just a filmmaker, you know? Look, I think it's just about, it's silly to even, it's everything would sound, it sounds cliche sometimes, but there's a truth in that is I think if you tend to try to follow a trend or try to follow something you think is commercial, I think you get lost, and I think if you go personal, then that's the only way your voice gets heard and the way you stand out, as opposed to trying to make an action movie because they sell or write this or that. You know, I've been around enough to see a lot of that, and that at some point, I think when you go personal, then it becomes more universal, and I think you get to see over the course of time, your voice stands out as opposed to, you know, does that make any sense? I think that's the only piece of advice that I think, you know, that I can give. That is certainly in a movie like this, when you go personal, it's a completely different high for a director, because your emotional connection to something when you're working through your own issues. Not that every movie is going to be about grief, but if you find a personal connection to the story, you see yourself in a character, you want to work through a certain idea, I think it's a different kind of high, and I think it never feels like a gig, you know? It's a different...
And a question for Thomas from April. How did you prepare for the role?
I don't know. It's always a weird question. I don't know how to answer that, but it starts with just reading the script and having some sort of reaction to it, and you're either thinking about it afterwards or you're not. And I had read the script like a year before Alfonso was even involved. I'd read it like years before I had even auditioned. So when I got into the room, I already felt like I had a connection to this character, like I had been following him, or and I don't know, when you have a personal connection to someone, then the rest is just kind of instinctual. But I guess a lot of my preparation was watching a lot of films, and a lot of our conversations were just about films that he would just send me DVDs all the time.
What were some of the films that you watched
The
for it?
first batch that you sent me, I think, was Midnight Cowboy, 400 Blows, Last Tango in Paris, Age of Innocence, and Beautiful. Iñárritu is Beautiful. And Dog... No.
And which was the last one?
Dog Day Afternoon.
Oh, Dog Day Afternoon.
No?
I'd already seen it.
That one got lost in the mail. I get all of them, I think, except Last Tango. What was...
Oh my God! To me, it's like the perfect movie.
It is a perfect
It's
movie,
a
but
perfect
what?
combination of-
What?
Well, a lot of the
To this.
conversations that we had were like, whenever I, like a young actor, it's like, have you seen like Dog Day? It was always my first one to go.
That was the batch that you sent me when I auditioned for your first movie.
And yeah.
And then, so this
It's good
was
for
even
any
before.
movie, is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
moral of
Well,
Dog
I just
Day
saw,
Afternoon.
it didn't work for the town, but I really love what he was doing and liked his real interest in film history. To me, that's a big deal. So we had a beer and we talked, and then I sent him some films, and that we stayed in touch. And then when he came back for this film, it just worked out, obviously, in a beautiful way. And then that became, as Greg, you had to do your homework, you know.
Well, the thing I'm thinking about Last Tango was the incredible honesty in Brando's performance.
There's nothing like that. I think he said he felt raped after that by Bertolucci, would never go there again. And after that, he would test every director. If he gave a director 70% and the director couldn't tell that he didn't give him 100, he wouldn't go even any deeper because how violated, and exposed he was on that film. That honesty of that performance in combination with the Storaro Bertolucci, collaboration, which I think to me that and The Conformist are perfect.
We totally agree. Yeah, they're both essential films. I think we covered this. What was it
I guess
like?
I don't know.
Go ahead.
It was just, like I said before, just kind of seeing him as a selfish character and that being okay. And if you could still make him likable and people still want to spend an hour and a half watching him, then that's the hard part, and that was my job. So, yeah, and I'm really, I don't know, it was just kind of about opening myself up emotionally and connecting to these characters. It's not about thinking about some past trauma in your own life. It's just about applying yourself to the situation. And yeah, and so it really opened me up emotionally.
Well, tell us a little bit, each of you, about what you're working on. Thomas, I know you're doing Skull Island, Kong. Tell us about that and what else we might...
I can't really say anything about
Can't say
it.
too much about it.
It's a great cast, and I really feel like I'm working with just some legendary people. I mean,
There's an ape somewhere, I'm
there's an ape
guessing.
somewhere in there. I haven't met him yet. But Brie Larson is the lead. She and Tom are kind of the leads of it, and then John C. Reilly and Samuel L. Jackson and some other Jason Mitchell and Corey Hawkins from Straight Outta Compton. Just tons of super talented people, all kind of in this great ensemble together. So.
And do you have
really
anything
excited.
else in the can coming out, or?
Yeah, I did a film called Brain on Fire with Chloe Moretz. That's hopefully is going to play some festival this year. Yeah, this year. But those are the two main things. Yeah.
And what about you, Alfonso?
Developing a few films. Foreigner is one of them. There's another one also that I'm attached to. There's a very personal film that I want to tell, set on the border. That if I can get it off the ground before those, then or one of those, then I will. If not, I'll do that eventually. It's something I've been wanting to make for 8 years or 9 years or something like this. And after Sundance, there was a real opportunity.
Something you wrote or
I wrote the
developed?
first draft, and I'm working with a writer who wrote another film that I'm attached to called The Current War, and we're having a great time. Hopefully, getting it on its feet this year, next year, and then I'm doing a lot of television work too after Sundance. A lot changed, and so now I have a deal with HBO, so to try to develop things and shoot pilots there and develop shows there. So.
Well, we're going to be watching both of your careers with great interest, and thank you so much for this movie and for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.